DaviePHD's Jargonbusters, Episode 7, 3rd of November 2020. If you watch the news, it's full of political jargon you may not fully understand. But what do these terms actually mean? And is the news really as bad as it sounds? In these videos, I'm going to bust the jargon and explain these things in terms you all understand. Now, a few weeks ago, I jargon busted GDP, and I've had requests to do a few more financial terms, but they're probably not worthy of a whole episode, so I've collected a few that you'll hear on the news, etc., in my attempt to jargon bust them. The first is recession. In economics, a recession is where there's a general decline in economic activity. Recessions generally occur when there's a widespread drop in spending. This may be triggered by various events, such as financial crises, external trade shocks, adverse supply shocks, the bursting of an economic bubble, or a large-scale natural disaster like the current pandemic. In the UK, it is defined as 2 or more financial quarters with decline of more than 1% each. Next is national debt. Now, put simply, it's the money owed by any nation. It can be categorised as internal debt owed to lenders within the country and external debt owed to foreign lenders. It can also include monies a government is obliged to pay its citizens, i.e. guaranteed pensions. Another common division of government debt is by duration, until repayment is due, so short-term debt is generally considered to be less than a year, long-term debt is maybe for more than 10 years, medium-term debt falls between these two boundaries. In home terms, it's the total of all the money your household still owes, mortgage, car payments, credit cards, etc. Third and fourth is surplus and deficit. Now, a government produces a budget, and that's a financial statement presenting a government's proposed revenues and spending for a financial year. Government budget balance, also alternatively referred to as general government balance or public budget balance or public fiscal balance, is the overall difference between government revenues and spending. A positive balance is called a surplus and a negative balance is called a deficit. In home terms, if you've got money left over after you've paid all your monthly bills, you're in surplus. However, if you have no money left and had to resort to credit cards and overdrafts to survive, you're in a deficit. Borrowing. It's just one of the strategies used by governments to offset a deficit. Governments can borrow from the IMF and the World Bank or other sources. Terms are offered according to our nation's credit rating. In home terms, as above, going to credit cards and overdrafts. Quantitative easing. That's just another strategy used by governments to offset a deficit. A nation's currency is generally backed by its national assets or gold reserves, which have a long-term and stable value. Quantitative easing is a monetary policy where a central bank will buy some less stable financial assets from commercial banks and other financial institutions, and then they will issue more currency against the value of these new assets. And this is difficult to describe in home terms, but I'm going to give it a go. If you, as an individual, had your own personal currency, let's call it Joe Blogg's bucks, then for Joe Blogg's bucks to have any value in the world, they would have to be backed by your assets, most likely your house. If you were to engage in some personal quantitative easing, then you'd add less valuable assets into the mix, say your car, your electronic gadgets, your jewellery, etc. You'd add them to the list and then you'd issue more currency against the value of those less valuable assets. Now, this is the short-term effect of making more money available to you so you can dig yourself out of a hole. But long-term, your car, your electronics, those things will depreciate in value as it's less stable than the value of your house. So in time, the currency, the amount of currency you have, is secured against less valuable assets. Thereby the currency will devalue. The only time quantitative easing is successful is when the additional funds are invested and it pays off. Or in home terms, if you had a little bit of extra money, and then you took it and placed a bet in the bookies and had a win. But that's always a risk. If the funds are then just used to pay for goods and services and general expenses, then the betting or investment doesn't happen, and you end up devaluing your currency. Credit rating. A credit rating is an evaluation of the credit risk of a prospective debtor, predicting their ability to pay back the debt, and it's a forecast of the likelihood of the debtor defaulting. This will also determine the likelihood of them obtaining credit and the terms on which said credit must be repaid. This doesn't really need further explaining. As we all do, nations have credit ratings. Balance of payments, also known as balance of international payments, or abbreviated as BOP, of a country, is the difference between all the money flowing into a country in a particular period of time, e.g. a quarter of a year, and the outflow of money to the rest of the world. Now, this isn't related to taxation, it's purely on trade. If a country's economy produces goods and provides services worth more than it has to buy in, then it will have a positive balance of payments, or a trade surplus. If the reverse was true, then the country would have a negative balance of payments, or a trade deficit. Nations poor in natural resources, with low levels of education and low-skilled workers, would have to import more than they export, and would likely have a negative balance of payments. Nations rich in resources, with skilled workers, high levels of education, should be importing less and have a positive balance of payments. Finally, the IMF and the World Bank. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, is an international organisation of 190 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. Formed in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, it came into formal existence in 1945 with 29 original member countries, with the goal of reconstructing the international payment system. It now plays a central role in the management of balance of payment difficulties and international financial crises. Countries contribute funds to a pool through a quota system, from which countries experiencing balance of payment problems can borrow money. Now, the World Bank is an international financial institution that provides loans and grants to governments of low and middle income countries for the purpose of pursuing capital projects. It comprises of two institutions, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and the International Development Association. The World Bank is a component of the World Bank Group. The World Bank was created at the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference along with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. The World Bank and the IMF are both based in Washington and work closely with each other. The World Bank's most recently stated goal is the reduction of poverty. So in home terms, the World Bank is just that, it's a bank. But the IMF is more like a credit union, where people who may not get a loan from the bank could still access the credit they need in an emergency. Well folks, that's it for money. If there's any other political jargon driving you nuts, let me know and I'll bust it. Otherwise, I'd ask you all to comment on the Facebook page, play nicely. Unionists are welcome too, as are their dissenting opinions, as long as they play nicely too. DaviePHD.